On Patrol with the Suffolk County PBA is a dynamic podcast that brings together some of the most influential voices in the nation.
From union leaders and elected officials to law enforcement experts who explore the pressing issues shaping America.
Through thought-provoking conversations, we empower listeners to think critically about law enforcement, political policy, and the future of our society.
Available on Spotify, iHeartRadio, YouTube, and all Suffolk PBA social media platforms. Tune in to On Patrol with the Suffolk County PBA.
Welcome to another episode of On Patrol with the Suffolk County PBA. I'm CJ Hunter, the treasurer of the PBA.
I'm Tanner Brandemar, the sergeant at arms of the PBA.
And today joining us is Rebecca Kassay. Rebecca's a rookie assembly person over in the New York State Assembly, and we're excited to have you on.
I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah. So, for everybody out there watching, what's it like being new to the Assembly?
I think it's like being new to anything, right? You can go in with expectations, which I always found expectations in life are the key to failure, and disappointment. So coming from a nonprofit background, coming from a small business background, understood obviously what the seat was that I'm running for, but didn't have any specific expectations of what it was going to be like to go in and serve, except that I was going to go to be a liaison for my community, to advocate for what's important for the community I've been working in for over a decade. And I have to say, it's been a really awesome experience. I found myself saying, when I got back from the end of session in June, they said, "Oh, what do you think? What do you think?" I said, "It's the job that I never knew I always wanted."
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's a great way to put it.
It's really, it's wonderful because I get to listen to folks all day long, understand problems that I never even crossed my mind, and then be a part of the solutions for it. So it's really, it's a joy. I didn't know when I went up there, I'm like, again, I think my least favorite part of politics is politics. And so the going up there and wondering, is like, are there just going to be a bunch of jerky politicians that I have to work with? And there's a handful. I'm not going to name names, but largely there are just wonderful, wonderful people up there who, like me, just want to go and represent their community, do good, leave it better than they found it, and that's really heartening. Just in a broader sense of seeing government from the inside and saying, you know what, it's not perfect, but it's working for the people. Yeah,
that's great to hear. I'm glad you put it that way too, because sometimes when I just think about it from the outside looking in, I wonder if it's almost like being the new kid in school, right? Where there's people that are accepting of you right away, and there's other people that will almost test you.
That's a great analogy. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And both, yes. And I'm so grateful that I found a group of colleagues who we have similar districts in sense, and also similar senses of humor, and personalities. Important. Yeah. And so, it's a lot like school. There can be little cliques here and there. When I was in school and in my adult life too, I always try to break through those and find connections with everyone so that, folks can't write you off for this reason or that reason. And it's been a great exercise, and a lot of energy goes into it, but I get so much more out of it than it goes in. So it's nice.
Yeah, it's really cool. So you have a pretty long history of serving your communities, right? You've been a volunteer for years. You were Port Jeff Library trustee for years, right?
Yeah, trustee of the village.
Oh,
yes.
The village.
Yeah.
Village.
So like village council sort of moment, board of trustees. And I only got into that level of government from running a teen volunteer program at Avalon Park for 7 years, getting kids off their phones into the environment, into the community, helping them see what role that they play, in the community. I think too often teens, young people grow up isolated, and, they see the world as from their perspective only. And I think sharing with young people the fact that folks work together to make the places we share and the things like the environment, public safety, everything, we all have a role that we can play to make it better. So I built that program. I was a small business owner. I had a bed and breakfast for 10 years, which was a big adventure. And so that's how I got into government, because I saw that there weren't a lot of folks with those perspectives and experiences in government, but you're making laws as a government that affect the environment, that affect small businesses. And so having been in those places, I said, I think maybe my perspective can be helpful.
Absolutely. And it's great to get the young people involved too, right? I mean, we talk about it here all the time, right? When we're preparing for the future, we look for that younger crop of police officers or delegates who want to eventually take on leadership roles within the union. And you want to kind of harvest that and make sure people are prepared to take the ball and run with it in the future.
Absolutely.
Right. You don't want somebody else to come in later in life, kind of on the blind, not knowing what to do.
Sure. And to have that mentorship opportunity, right? So there's so many great officers here that young people can get to know and help make themselves the best version of themselves as a young person they can be, but also see where they can go and how to get there. So they're the explorers, right?
Yeah. So we have the Explorer program through the police department.
Yes. I thought it was very interesting that you brought up like getting kids away from their phones. I think that's very interesting because we're so caught up in what goes on the internet and whatnot. It's almost becomes reality to a lot of these kids.
Right.
Where instead of going out and doing stuff and being productive, like you probably were forcing them to do in this program, I think that's a great thing.
Yeah, and it is. And I think that ties in a lot with mental health, for young people and less young people. I'll put myself in the less young category at this point. But, we all struggle with, it's an addiction to be on our phones. We're scrolling, we're looking for that little, the laugh, the moment. And so when you train yourself to put the phone down and actually look people in the eye and make that eye contact and listen and understand, I think that's going to be helpful. Whatever kind of volunteerism or community work you're doing, it's important to keeping our society together because, you talk to people you agree with. And then at some point, I always say my husband and I have an amazing relationship, but we don't agree on everything 100% of the time. And we still have a great relationship. So like everyone, you can agree on a lot. I think most people, agree on 80% of what's out there in the world, politically, it's like, your infrastructure, public safety, protecting firefighters and supporting veterans, all these really non-political issues. And it's those fringe issues that get so much play on social media, so much play on the news. And they're important issues, to be sure. And we have to address them as neighbors and at large. But we need to learn how to be comfortable with those uncomfortable conversations. And I think that putting yourself in social situations off social media, person to person, it really brings us back to the ability to talk about things that we disagree on, without just being a keyboard warrior about it.
Yeah, I'm glad you bring that up, how, probably 80% of the issues, everybody pretty much agrees on what the right path forward is, right? Mm-hmm. We all care about public safety. We all care about the future for our families, our children as they grow up. And one of the things that we've tried to highlight on this show is having perspectives from Democrats, Republicans, right? And I think if people watch this show regularly, they see that a lot of the thoughts and feelings are the same, right? It's those fringe issues that get 99% of the media coverage nowadays.
Yeah.
Right. And we're not all that different than what people might think if you just watched mainstream media all the time.
Absolutely. And I think, I appreciate that about your show and these efforts to help people see that, hey, it's, let's stop being so freaked out and saying, are you a Democrat or a Republican? And depending on your answer, either I'm with you or against you. Right. I'm almost as frustrated when, if either during the campaign we were politically knocking doors or we've been doing constituent outreach door to door this summer. So I'll take a legislative aide and we'll go and meet people literally where they're at. We'll go door to door and say, hey, I just want you to know what government can do for you. Whether it's right now you have an issue or in the future with the DMV, Department of Labor, like we just want to know that that we're a resource for you and here's how to contact us. And so a couple of people opened the door and they said, well, are you a Democrat or a Republican? And I said, I'm here to serve in my governmental capacity. I serve all of my constituents. And some folks don't want to continue the conversation unless they know. And whether someone, if I have to get to the point where I say, well, I'm a registered Democrat, they'll say, thanks, bye. And, and that's it and miss out on the resource, but also when someone says, okay, great. And then continue the conversation, it's like, but why do we allow ourselves to put ourselves and each other in these two categories?
It's so divisive.
Absolutely. Because it's not, again, we agree on the majority of these issues, and to shut someone out based on the little letter next to their name, I think is a very dangerous thing. And so that's, when I'm up in Albany, I always try to reach across the aisle if there's legislation that I have or a colleague has that I want to understand another perspective, I'll go and try to find someone on the other side of the aisle. We have so many great folks here, even on Long Island. I love conversation with Mike Durso because he cracks me up.
Yeah, Mike's a great guy.
Yeah.
And he's a good family man at heart.
Yeah.
He's up there trying to do what's right for his family's future.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, it's something that I actively do.
We appreciate the fact that you said that you brought up Mike, who does a great job in his capacity as an assembly person. And it's good to see that members on the Long Island caucus can sit down and talk to each other regardless of what side that they're on. Mm-hmm. You guys probably don't agree on every issue, but I'm sure you guys can come to some kind of have a conversation about your disagreements and go your separate ways and say, all right, I learned something from him or her that could be valuable. Absolutely.
And something else that I've gotten involved with, along with one of our other Long Island members at RA, is the Future Caucus. So it's a group that meets monthly up in Albany for New York State legislators. And then we met down in D.C. in June. But it's legislators 45 years of age and younger, both sides of the aisle, regardless of party, just who want to come together and get good work done for their communities.
That's great.
And so it's a great way to, we up in Albany every month, we have a presenter. Ed's the Republican chair. We have Alex Boris as the Democratic chair of the New York caucus. And so they'll bring in a presenter about AI technology or public safety or a union, whatever it is. And then we have an opportunity to sit and chat over coffee about what legislation are you working on, et cetera. But the Future Summit, the DC conference, was such a nice opportunity to really just get to spend more time. And again, it paves the way to have those uncomfortable conversations, because politically, I think there's so much division and it feels like the knives are always out that you don't feel comfortable all the time talking to colleagues and feeling like I'm going to try to have this vulnerable conversation. But are they going to use this against me come the November time? And it's so important to get past that, because the only people who lose at the end of the day is our community, our officers, people out there serving us. Because if we can't work together to serve our communities and do that in good faith, then the communities lose out.
It's great to hear that all the young representatives are getting together monthly like that, because in theory, you're going to be the bulk of the representation for the next 20, 25, 30 years, right? And there's a value to experience. Nobody's ever denying that, right? The people that have been up there for
sure.
25 years, there is a value to experience, but we want to be able to, move forward with plans into the future and what's best for the next generation. So it's great to hear that the younger representatives are all at least having open dialogue and open communications on a monthly basis.
Yeah, it's healthy. It's healthy for government. And, I personally really appreciate it.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you touched on a little bit the importance of mental health and, the reaching across the aisle, bipartisan efforts, right? So one of the things, obviously, because we're a police union that we pay attention to is, any pending legislation that would affect us and our membership. Mm-hmm. So we know you've been the co-sponsor on a couple of bills that would directly affect us. Why don't we touch a little bit on some of those issues you've been working on so we can educate our members and the public?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, we've talked a lot about 50A and some of the issues that we've had with defense attorneys calling our character or our integrity into question because of past complaints against us, if there's a pattern of complaints. But very often, if a police officer has, say, 10 complaints against them, all 10 of them might be either unfounded, exonerated, or unsubstantiated, right? So none of these things ever actually happen. They're false allegations, but they're still using it to question our character and integrity in court. So you're part of putting together a bill that's going to help us battle that obstacle.
Right. And it's a great example of folks from both sides of the aisle who are bringing concerns to the table and saying, how do we move this forward? Because I think we all agree, I can't speak for everyone, but I wholeheartedly agree that if a complaint is unfounded or unsubstantiated, there's that can be a weapon against an officer,
right.
Where if you have a great officer who's going in and, for example, trying to break up gang violence, and they folks from the gang understand that, this is the officer who's onto us, or, getting ready to really break something down here. And then they put 5 complaints against him, and he or she gets benched because they don't want to. Like, they say, all right, there's all these complaints. We don't want to put them out in the field, this and that. And now that's impeding the ability for our officers to be out there making our communities more safe.
The criminals are basically using the system they're playing the system against the officer.
Right. Absolutely.
Correct. And so we have to prevent that. And we also have to make sure that if there are bad actors, that, that behavior is corrected or called out. And so, we definitely, I love being part of these conversations. I love sitting down with you folks. We've sat down since before I was in office and we'll continue to regularly down here and up in Albany so that we can, any questions that I hear from my colleagues or concerns, I get to bring to you and say, well, how do we look at this and how do we navigate that, obstacle, and then vice versa. When, you bring this and I get to liaise that to colleagues who might not understand that other perspective. So
because as when you got involved in being a co-sponsor on this bill and got involved in this bill, did you hear a lot from like lobbyists up there? Like we have Chris Wolf, our lobbyist. I'm sure you know him. He's around all the time. I'm sure he spoke to you about the bill and what we were looking at. I'm sure you spoke to PCNY. I'm sure you know about them, the Police Conference of New York.
Absolutely, yeah.
Did you also speak to other members of your caucus about, because I saw there's a lot of Democrats on that bill. Mm-hmm. Could you speak a little bit about that, how that worked out and the direction it's going?
So before getting to that specific question, I always talking about, how has it been being a rookie? I was shocked to discover that by the end of the first session, it's a 2-year session, or 2 sessions in the course of 2 years. By the end of this first of the 2, there were 9,000 bills introduced in the assembly. 9,000 bills. And so first I have to say, I appreciate whenever, unions or individuals or, community members bring to my attention any bill that they find either concerning or something that they would really like to see move forward, because we're not sitting around reading every bill that comes out as it comes out.
Right. It'd be impossible.
Absolutely. So,
that's a lot. It would be 9,000 bills. That's over 9,000 pages. That's a lot of reading.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, gosh, yeah. Some of the bills are, a couple dozen pages long, and some of them are 5 words, which is, but it's there is no way that. Well, I shouldn't say there's maybe an assembly member somewhere at some point who's read, every single bill. But I always say to my community members, to, folks I sit down with, that I appreciate when bills get brought to my desk, because otherwise I might not get to see them. Right. And so that's a great way to start conversations. And so, yeah, Chris Wolf has been wonderful coming around, having conversations. I get to talk to other members. I know we have members who have served in law enforcement or correctionals. I know just yesterday we found out my colleague, Assemblymember Billy Jones up in the North Country, as stepping down. He's understandably has a wonderful daughter and family and wants to spend more time with them. But he was a retired correctional officer and was someone who I would go to to have conversations about legislation that had to do with, and affected correctional officers in New York State, because he has that perspective, and that's really valuable to me. So, and then down here, we have Assemblymember O'Farrell, who's, previous law enforcement. Steve Stern is always someone who I go to check in and, see. He's been in, he started...
He's been there for a little bit.
Yeah. So, which again brings us back to there's a value to experience too, right? Mm-hmm. So you have Steve Stern, who does not have a history in law enforcement, but has a law history as a representative, as an assembly person.
There you go.
Right. So there is value in experience.
Absolutely.
Too.
Yeah. And his district, in the Huntington area is similar to mine, has that, mix. I have the North Shore from Stony Brook to Port Jeff, and then all the way down to Coram, Gordon Heights, some of Selden area. So it's a very mixed district as far as its needs go, its concerns. And so, checking in with fellow assembly members, Assemblymember Judy Griffin's really wonderful. She's carried another bill that did pass unanimously in the assembly, the peer-to-peer mental health bill for officers. And, that's something that I had approached her throughout the course of the session and said, what can I do to help? How do we make sure that there's support for this? So I'm really, grateful to her for championing that. And all of us were behind her all the way. And hopefully the governor signs that into law. And
yeah, that's one of the things that we've been paying close attention to for the last 2 years or so. Because, if you watch this show, just about every episode, at some point in time, we talk about police officer mental health. So to be able to get that mental health bill through, and now it's sitting on Governor Hochul's desk, hopefully she signs it into law, it will be a huge step forward in battling the mental health crisis that police officers are facing right now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I cannot begin to imagine the stress that officers carry each and every day. And on top of that, the added layer of stress of, well, if I see someone about this, if I talk about this, am I compromising my job, my career, my, the livelihood of my family? And, and then of course the social stigma as well.
Right.
And so as a government, a lot of coming from the community background, sometimes I say, okay, is this a community problem, a government problem, or both? And this is really something that the government can and must do to address and support the work that you're asking us to do. And so again, if we reach out to the governor's team once in a while and check in about bills, and this is definitely one that I'll say, hey, how's that going? And just want to let you know that I'm really hoping she signs this one.
Right. Yeah. The mental health is huge, and again, the 50A bill is huge, because all we're asking for is to get the complaints against us that have been false wiped off our records. So our integrity is not called into question for no reason.
Sure.
Right? We're not asking for, if there was something we did wrong, to be wiped clean. Like, we get it. So, and sometimes mistakes happen. Sometimes the things we do wrong end up really just being training issues. We get retrained on it and it doesn't happen again. Right? It's not always a malintent thing. These aren't corruption cases we're talking about. But we want the ones that we are innocent of to be off our record.
Right. And I think going hand in hand, I think in our conversations, we said clean slate, took a step forward. And so we understand that nobody's perfect. You retrain, you get resources, and, you got to give people the, empower them to be their best selves, to be their better selves.
Right.
And so whether it's in, law enforcement or people who have ended up on the other side, but have grown and are ready to be someone who's productive in society and get out there and
just get a fresh restart.
That's it. That's it. So absolutely.
Yeah. So one of the other things that we've spoken about in the past too, we just had Bridget Topping on, and
wonderful.
Bridget had a lot of very nice things to say about you off the air, and she gave a lot of credit to you, where you went to one of the community meetings where she presented, right? And you told her, I'm not going to forget about this. This means a lot to me. And you've actually come forward and delivered for her.
Yes. And I think between the work that Bridget is leading up and her energy behind it, when she gave her presentation, she was so engaging. She was moving around the room, and she really embodied that energy that has started and I want to see continuing to snowball as far as tackling behavioral mental health issues and helping find that synergy with our officers who are running into the same folks day in, day out, and that takes up time from public safety at large, as far as, all right, we have an individual who has an ongoing problem, an issue that they deserve support and care for. But not every officer can be trained on, mental health, behavioral health, all this. And so I think that, that is such a key to furthering the success throughout all of the precincts. And so, watching her present and then getting into the role that I'm in, we found an opportunity to give a $20,000 grant to some public safety initiative. And she came to mind right away.
That's great.
The behavioral health unit. So we were able to connect with the team. Suffolk Police at large was great, because in government, sometimes I've found things happen really fast. So you'll get a call, like you find out about an opportunity. It's like, okay, well, you have, 48 hours to get XYZ information. And so everyone was really wonderful just making it happen. And so we're excited to have delivered that and further their work, which furthers the work of every officer out there.
I think that's great for the community in general too, because a lot of what she's talking about allows us to be more efficient as police officers. It also allows for a more efficient treatment of the victims or patients dealing with mental health.
Absolutely.
So I think we applaud you for getting that done with her in mind. And I think mental health is a big issue, and it'll continue to be a big issue. So we appreciate that.
Without a doubt. And we're seeing, we see that, across Suffolk County, across the nation, across the world. Mental health stems, from so many of the violent crimes, so many of the domestic issues, all of it. And so if we can, as a society, again, destigmatize in a sense, and also understand how do we stop the cycle of these types of behaviors, so that individual has greater dignity, whoever's suffering from mental health issues, they can go on to be, again, their best lives, and then the community will thrive they're in.
Yeah, absolutely. These mental health issues create a domino effect of other problems, right? Whether it be higher crime rates, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, which leads to more crime typically. Right. So it's great to be able to have a new program, this behavioral health unit that Bridget's a part of, trying to head off these issues at a root cause.
Yes.
Right. And it's great to have representatives like yourself who see the value in that and help with funding for it. Because as much as, $20,000 is great and is going to help, it's really a drop in the bucket of what we really need in grand scheme of things.
Absolutely.
But at least it's a step in the right direction. And we're fortunate to have you there and really taking that leap right away without, much experience behind you, right? You went right into this and said, oh, when I'm in a position to help, I'm going to do it. And you did.
Absolutely. And getting back to the Albany big picture, the first thing when you go up there, so legislators are typically in session January through June, anywhere between 3 to 5 days a week. And so the first thing you start chipping away at legislation, maybe that was being worked on the previous year. You'll have voting throughout the course of the days, but really you're amping up first thing to the budget. And so the budget is supposed to pass April 1st. Supposed to. It's a lot of work in that sentence, In theory. Those are the big conversations. And it was an incredible process to, say, all right, what are, put together those letters. What are my budget asks? And go to the community and say, what do we need? And for me, being in my first session, it was like building the plane while we were flying it. And so you're going out there, you're saying, all right, and I think, based on the number of wins we brought back to the community, I'm very proud of my team and, myself for going in and being that champion for the community. And we are working hard all summer and all fall to gear up because now we know what it looks like. So now we're already getting ready. Like, the day after session, we took a breath. And then the day after session, it was like, all right, let's go. Come on.
And you had a couple of really big issues that you wanted to try to face and take on right away. Like you had the flooding in Stony Brook, right? And you lobbied hard for some state funding to come down to help repair that project.
That's in a holding pattern. And the Stony Brook Duck Pond is one of the most visual issues we have in the district right now, or visually apparent issues. Obviously, it's much more than just visual. The public safety element of that. I've talked to the mayors, head of the harbor in Nisquag. If they need mutual aid from fire departments, and those fire departments can't use Harbor Road anymore to get right to the communities, and so it'll take an extra 5+ minutes for engines to get to a house that needs, I don't want to jinx anyone burning buildings, but just and someone in need.
But so
that's critical. 5 minutes is critical in a fire.
Yeah, absolutely,
huge, and or a medical emergency, whatever it is. And so it's a public safety issue to get that road fixed. Essentially at this point, our understanding is we're waiting for a nonprofit to sign the FEMA application, and then we can move forward. FEMA, hopefully we'll be able to cover 75% of the repair, and then between the state, the county, and the town, we're all standing at the ready to say, how do we get funding to make sure that we cover that 25%, that the FEMA's not covering, and get this thing done as quickly as possible.
Right. And you jumped right in and you started addressing the issue right away, right? It's still in a holding pattern. But my point is you weren't holding back. You weren't sitting back, waiting to see how this all works. You want to dive right in and do whatever you could to help the community.
Absolutely. Well, we're not promised, any amount of time. And so I waste no time, going in. And again, having had that community experience and worked with folks, I knew what I could start with while I continued exploring. Something I'm really proud to have delivered, and the governor just signed this last week, was a bill regarding these IA septic systems. So essentially, if you're a homeowner and you need to get your cesspool replaced, they're really, starting to, in some places, require for new buildings. But these advanced septic systems that take a lot of the nitrogen and the phosphorus out of the water before it ends up in our drinking water, in our, the water that we have recreation in our bays and the sound. And so, for me, tackling both the environmental aspect of that, but also these IA systems are much more expensive than the traditional cesspool systems. So the state previously had a cap of $15,000 of a grant that you can apply for to offset the cost. And I put in legislation that passed and the governor signed to increase that it was $10,000. Now it's $25,000.
That's a substantial increase.
Yes. Yeah. And the systems cost more or less like $30K, and the county also kicks in some money. So now when if a homeowner gets that call, the septic's backed up, that's a crappy enough problem to begin with. Yes, I got the dad jokes all day. And but now homeowners can apply for this program and know that that's not just one more big hit in our cost of living crisis that we're experiencing, which also drives a lot of public safety issues as far as 100%. People experiencing homelessness, losing their apartment, their mortgage, whatever it is.
And the stress of something like that too. The money is a huge stressor.
And here in Suffolk County, we know better. I don't want to say better than anywhere else in the world, but you talk to everyone, and we are financially stressed all the time, and that drives behavior. And so, for me, how do we bring those taxpayer dollars back to the county? And so I was able to secure it was $30 million statewide for the program, but $20 million of that will be for Suffolk County alone.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So if you're out there, if your septic system needs to be replaced, you could apply, call our office, or go. The county is administering the program, so we're working well with them. And make sure you get your taxpayer dollars back in your pocket.
Yeah, absolutely. Every little bit helps, and honestly, that's a substantial amount towards that kind of project. Because who has $30,000 just laying around? No, right? Most people do not.
No.
Right. So one of the other things I was reading about recently, and I'm a little less familiar with this, but it sounded interesting. The Long Island Railroad, right? And I think it's in particular the Port Jeff line, but you probably know better. It might not be just that line, but we're looking to update how those lines work, right? We want to move to an electric form of transport versus the diesel form. So maybe you could even educate me a little bit on that, because I was just reading about this recently.
Sure. Yeah. So that was the other thing that I'm really proud of. It was actually the last bill of the session, and we do not have time. And I realize it's not terribly interesting to anyone who's not thick in it and nerding out on the governmental end of it. But it was the last bill to pass the 2025 session. Okay. Was this, it's called the Furthering Rail Transit in Suffolk County Act. And so what it does is essentially overcomes one of the biggest hurdles we're facing here in Suffolk County to electrify the Port Jeff line by directing the DOT to grant an easement to the MTA. Lots of complications in there. But at the end of the day, essentially, the Suffolk County Land Bank through Suffolk County is offering the MTA 40 acres of land for $10.
Wow.
$10. And here on Long Island, you can't get a better deal. Right. And so
I don't think anywhere in the country you can get
No, literally though. Literally. Yeah, that's maybe in 1810.
Yeah, right.
That would be a good deal then too. And land is so scarce here that having, this is the previous Lawrence Aviation Superfund site, which was just delisted by the EPA fairly recently. So it's cleaned up, it's ready to go. The 40 acres would be to build the rail yard, but an electric rail yard as opposed to the diesel rail yard. And so what that will do is make it so that we can have a one-seat ride. Anyone living on the North Shore can get on in Port Jefferson or Stony Brook, wherever they're getting on, and ride the same train all the way to the city. Whereas right now you have to transfer in Huntington. And that's a pain in the butt, especially if it's cold, it's raining. But also if you're a commuter and you're doing that 5 days a week, you want to get on, sit down, open your laptop, your book, whatever, and just know 2 hours will be there.
I grew up in Queens, where there's a 25-minute ride from Auburndale train station to Manhattan. And I can't believe that people out here in Long Island have to take the train a half hour to somewhere like Huntington, or even you go to Jamaica, it's almost an hour ride from the South Shore, and then change trains and then still have another 45 minutes to the city. It's crazy, if you ask me.
Oh, no, absolutely. My husband did that for a year and realized, he's like, I got to find a job out here somewhere. It's not a lifestyle he wants, but people do it for decades.
Right.
And so how do you, if we're asking people to use public transit, and, you have congestion pricing, which is, very controversial, and also finding that it's helping with the flow of traffic, in Manhattan. And so how do we then say, all right, listen, if you're taxing commuters, how do you give back to commuters? That's always my perspective. It's how do we then say, if we want you driving less, how do we give that money back to the people who are utilizing, public transit, and you make public transit better? And so this is, not only is it, environmentally and health-wise, taking the diesel engines off the line, but also improving the ride, making it possible maybe in the future to have a shuttle that runs between, Huntington and Port Jeff a little bit more often. But also you're looking at those communities along the line and saying, how is this going to help with economic development, especially in Port Jeff Station area, where we have seen higher crime levels in that area. If you have better rail transit, it's going to be more appealing, like the Ronkonkoma project that just finished there, to have folks come in and say, all right, let's build a community that is feathering in well with the existing community, that, it's the character of the neighborhood. It's not overwhelming. It's not creating.
It's more appealing to commuters that are commuting to the city, because that train ride might be like 15 minutes longer instead of being like an hour longer because of the change.
Correct. And that's it. And so that's where, you improve rail transit and everything along the line is improved. So economic development, all the chambers of commerce are behind this. And so that's, we were able to deliver that. And we're hoping that the governor signs that soon as well, so that, this is something that folks in Suffolk County have been working on for, pointedly for at least a decade, but this is decades in the works as far as electrification goes. I knocked on a door of a woman who said, well, I'm moving, I'm in process of moving out. But when I moved here, I think she said in like the late 70s, they said, oh yeah, in a couple of years, the rail line's going to be electric here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the Port Jeff line. Wow. And she's like, still, so here we are, fast forward, 30 some odd years, and it's not done.
Wow.
50 some odd years. I can't.
And you're helping it get done.
Well, 20 years ago was still the 80s, right?
I know, right? Yeah, that's where I'm at. I'm like, what do you mean?
My wife and I joke about that all the time.
Yes.
Right? It's incredible how fast time flies.
Yeah. My husband likes to point out things like, oh, well, we're closer to such and such a year than the past year.
I see that on social media all the time. It's weird to think about.
Yeah. I'm not okay with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now you and your husband, you have a bed and breakfast together, right? Did you open that after your husband decided to stop commuting to the city? Was that how that worked out, or what's the time frame for that?
Yeah, sure.
What happened?
So we closed it at the end of last December, because this job for me should be 110% of anyone's attention, in my opinion. That I think if you take on this role in your community, like I'm working, I don't know how many hours, 80 hours a week plus, that when I go home, I just want to be home. And so, but previously in, was it 2013, we're looking for homes. We fell in love with this big old Victorian on Main Street in Port Jeff, but it's always just going to be my husband and I. And so we said, it's a lot of house for two people. And so we had talked about, we love staying in bed and breakfast when we travel. We said, well, we talked about when we retire, maybe opening a B&B. How much work could it be? Let's just do it now. The answer is a lot of work. It's a lot of work, but it really, I'm so grateful for that experience, because not only, financially did it help me, my husband and I, who were both had full-time jobs, but again, living out here on Long Island, it's so expensive. Having that third source of income was really helpful. It helped us fix up the house. And then it also, introduced me to the business community locally. I joined the chambers of commerce, really got to understand, the needs and frustrations of the business community, and become part of that, those groups of folks who were really out there, networking, trying to help each other's businesses, but building the community at large. And that was really informative to the way that I see this role as well.
Is that really what started your almost political career, going that direction?
I think so. Yeah. Between that and then with the environmental, the volunteer group that I ran with teens, I networked with dozens of environmental nonprofits in the area. And so getting to see through their eyes sort of what, we'd go out and do beach cleanups, and there's all this, plastic stuff on the beach. And you're like, how do we do better than to just clean it up? How do we address why is this specific kind of item ending up on the beach all the time? Mm-hmm. And what can we do to, look for that? And so I love looking at big pictures and then drilling in and seeing, all right, what are the details here? How do we make something work that doesn't neglect the fact that we live in this advanced society and a society of convenience largely? And so I'm not, I'm a pragmatic environmentalist, and try to see where the steps are that we can take to help keep the environment clean, because the environment's key to, I think it's $8 billion of our economy is based on the Long Island Sound and our waterways. And so if we don't keep those clean economically, we're really going to be hurting even more,
right.
So that's a perspective that I think always needs to be brought to the table. But how do we do that? And also, acknowledge that plastics aren't going to go away tomorrow 100%. It's just like, how do we do better to make sure that we're stewarding and, you know, keeping an environment and a community safe for, not just this generation, but, you know, 7 generations down the line. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And it's like, you know, I remember being taught as a kid, you know, reduce, reuse, recycle.
You got it.
Right. It's not disappearing. It's not going away, but do what you can to help. Right.
Yep. And we could all do a little something every day and it'll make big change.
Right. So. Exactly. I'm a believer in that too. You know, we were always taught as kids, you know, reuse the water bottles. You don't have to throw it away after one use, right? Just little things like that does make a difference.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
So looking forward now into the next session, what are some of the things you have your eyeballs on? Like, what are you thinking about? What would you really like to see move forward?
Gosh, we have so many things on the front burner because I can't say enough. I have an amazing staff. You know, really my chief staff, Emily Murphy. I have Ed Gubelman up in Albany. My 2 legislative aides. They're really we work so well together, and they're so tolerant. Every time I say, guys, I have an idea. And they're like,
what are we getting into?
Yeah, and what now? But really, it's I'm blessed with that, and the community is blessed with that. And so one of the initiatives that we're continuing to tackle, I started doing some research and realized, this is a very complicated ball of yarn here. So let's tackle this summer and fall. Is cracking down on the illegal cannabis shops in in my district, but beyond too. Because I think there's what I'm finding the more I talk to community members is that there's a sense that this is what New York's legal cannabis rollout is meant to look like, where you have all these head shops that aren't checking IDs, they're selling to kids, they're selling illegal products that aren't regulated, and that's all straight up illegal. Right. And I know, Suffolk police have been really coming under Kevin Catalina, right, the new initiatives to crack down on these. And so, we'll be meeting with them soon to understand how we as state partners can help further that work and make sure that, they have the tools they need. We've talked to the Office of Cannabis Management a lot, who, again, I was surprised because I would think that they would be, I would have thought they would have been defensive when I reached out and said, guys, we got to do something about this. And they said, please help. They said, we wish more members would reach out to us and ask us how to facilitate this, because they're as frustrated as we are that there's just all these illegal shops. And it seems like it should be a really easy fix to shut them down. But, this, that, and the other rules. So working with the town of Brookhaven, Suffolk County, and then the state, and of course, the police were. Do
you have a lot of communication back and forth with the 6th precinct? Do they?
Yes. Yeah.
You communicate with them, let them know what's going on. I'm sure they keep you in the know of what's going on. So
yes. Yeah. And that's, we, for years I've been attending the meetings there. And they do a great job presenting consistently to the public. And we're, continuing to build that relationship and really trying to help them know how, we're here to help make their work easier or more effective. They're already doing an incredible job, but I'm just like, how do I make it even better?
Right.
And so, with the cannabis shops, I think that's something that across the board, however one feels even about cannabis as a substance, having illegal shops that are, again, breaking laws in 10 different ways every day, operating is just, it's not. I always look at like cannabis and alcohol. Like if you had, someone making bathtub gin or wine in their basement and then just opening up a shop and selling it, that would never be allowed in a million years, So so we gotta have the same strictness to the regulation there, and make sure that, it's only getting into the hands of folks as much as we can that, are 21 plus and
right. The regulations.
Yes,
and that was the whole point of this to begin with, right? Because there was always going to be a black market for this stuff, right? Mm-hmm. Just like during Prohibition, there was a black market for alcohol, right? But the point of this was to regulate it, make sure it was as safe as it could be, have laws in place to keep it out of the hands of children, right? So the people in charge of regulating it, right, the group that you spoke to, that I would think, and it makes sense, that they see the same problem you see. They want it to be done the right way, because otherwise the whole experiment could blow up in their face.
Absolutely. And it feels like it has, that the rollout has not been smooth, and I'll absolutely say that, it's been messy. It's been problematic for communities. And so, and then you have these business owners who are trying to do the right thing, open legal shops, and it's costing them, $1 million+ to, do it the right way. And so what message is being sent to people who are trying to do the right thing when someone could just, take an empty storefront, throw a bunch of illegal products in it and make a bunch of money?
They're competing with competitors that don't belong in the market.
That's it.
They're playing by unfair rules.
Right. And then, even the substance, I reached out to the Attorney General and she's on board and we're going to be continuing these conversations is where are these products even coming from? Because they're not supposed to be produced here in New York. And if they're not produced here in New York, they shouldn't be being, and approved by the state of New York, they shouldn't be sold in shops. So trying to, again, get not just to the problem that we visually see, but how is this problem being perpetuated by these products that are being, and who's creating them and how do we crack down on them? Because you don't know what's in them, it's almost no better than, the black market where you don't know what it's laced with. You don't know the concentration or whatever it is, and so we like whoever's choosing to use legal cannabis, that's there for them. But we want to make sure that, I want to make sure that there's no confusion on what's legal and what's not illegal. We had an issue, we saw somewhere in the community a pop-up market, sort of a festival, and there was a tent of folks selling homemade edibles. And I was like, no. And then I look a little closer and they're like homemade edibles meant to look like gummy worms and cotton candy and all this.
That's exactly what we're trying to defeat.
Literally, it was like, if you made a caricature of like what's illegal, it was this. And so, and it was an innocent, as far as the coordinators goes, they said, oh, well, we talked to so-and-so and they said that it wasn't a legal problem. And then, we chased that down and it's a communication issue. And so as a result of that, my office put together a flyer and sent it out to every, Chamber of Commerce and village and, anyone who might be having a pop-up festival with vendors that said, hey, FYI, intoxicating cannabis substances cannot be sold at pop-up markets. There's a conversation about that currently happening at the state level. But even when that happens, it has to be someone with a license. And then you have to have a grower there as well, that kind of thing. So at the end of the day, right now, no cannabis, no intoxicating cannabis. CBD is a different thing. It's not intoxicating. But we got so many responses from folks saying, oh, I had no idea. And we've been having cannabis, people with intoxicating cannabis reach out and ask if they could table at our farmers market. And we didn't know. So again, that's where I see my role as someone who's in communication with New York State's Office of Cannabis Management, able to reach out and say, can you just confirm that this is the yes, this is the no? Give it a go, and then get that information to the community so that everybody's safer.
Right. And it's important for people to realize, too, that, with these regulations and all these shops popping up, right, not just the farmers markets, but the stores. It seems like there's a new store that pops up every 2 to 3 weeks, right, all along Route 25, right, busy roadway that goes through all sorts of hamlets from Suffolk all the way out to Nassau County. It seems like these shops are popping up all the time.
Yeah.
Is there any that you're aware of, any clear indicator that somebody might be able to see from the outside looking in that, like, wait a minute, this one doesn't belong here. This one's operating illegally?
So you can go to the Office of Cannabis Management website and see who had, where there are licensed shops.
Right.
We, I think, just got the first licensed shop in Brookhaven just opened.
Right. And it seems like there's more than that out there.
Oh my gosh, there are so many more.
Right.
So essentially, if you're looking at a shop and it's selling, and it's saying, oh, we sell this, and you go inside, it's probably illegal. And so you can go on OCM's website, and I know nobody likes being a narc, but especially because it's a public safety issue, if parents know that their kids or their kids' friends were able to purchase from some shop, you can go on and report it, and that'll put it on OCM's radar. They'll, hopefully communicate with Suffolk County Police and be able to prioritize going to that shop because there was a report that said they're selling to minors or they're selling illegal products, whatever it is.
That's huge for public safety and just the general quality of life in the county and in the town of Brookhaven.
And even just like the legitimate business owners, the ones that are doing it legitimately, they should not have to face this competition from the cheaters out there.
Absolutely.
Because the criminals, that's what it is. It's a black market that they're competing with.
Right. And again, it's like I just think of any other product that requires licensing and regulation that if you just open up a shop and say, okay, we're just going to do it, they'd be shut down so fast. So, that's one thing. And then the shipping of intoxicating cannabis products into the state, I heard from a superintendent that I met with that kiddos were getting their hands on products by having them sent to abandoned homes because they don't require a signature. So you can just order, gummies or whatever to a house that nobody lives in. Wait for the package. Okay, it arrived. Go and pick it up after school, and then that's one way that kids are getting their hands on it. So I said, okay, seems like a simple fix. And this is the one, Albany and government thing, that anything that seems like it should be simple, guess again. And so I said, all right, this is maybe pass legislation saying any cannabis shipments, sort of like when you order wine or any kind of alcohol online, someone 21 and over has to sign for it at home. So I said, why don't we just do the same? And the response that I got was, oh, that's not happening. It's illegal to ship cannabis products, illegal intoxicating cannabis products in the state. And I said, I looked up companies. I'm like, I can have some ordered to the office if you want me to prove that, this is happening in the state of New York. And they said, okay. So now, so back to your question, what are we looking for legislatively for next year is how do we create laws in New York State that tackles that portion of it while also tackling the enforcement portion by working with community partners like Suffolk PD.
Right. And that's something that, not just law enforcement should be behind, but all the chambers of commerce should be behind, right? Because you want the legitimate business owners to have a legitimate opportunity to thrive.
That's it. That's it.
I think also keeping it out of the hands of minors is huge. And I think for public safety in general, they're not supposed to be indulging in those things for a reason.
Right.
And I think that it deters them going down the line and growing up into productive adults when they start engaging in this stuff and they can get their hands on it so easily.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And so that's, these illegal shops that are caught selling to kids, I think that should be a huge, fine and punishment, whatever is determined and on the books. That's something that is degrading the safety of our communities, as on top of just being there as this shop. So, really, looking forward to continuing to work with Suffolk PD on this and work up in Albany to see, how can we shift the cannabis laws to make sure that we're addressing the issues that are coming to light, as this rolls on.
All right.
Awesome to hear.
Yeah, it is great to hear because you want to get to the root causes of issues. And, like Tanner brought up with the kids, there's minimum age requirements for a reason, right? You don't want 13-year-olds to be experimenting with this stuff when their brains are still developing.
Right.
Right. I mean, at least at 21, right? Same thing with alcohol. Your brain's probably fully developed and you could maybe fight off the negative effects a little better. Right.
And yet you're an adult. You can make decisions.
Right. You make the decision for yourself.
Right. And that's where, with so many substances out there, I always say it wrong, kratom.
I just heard this on the news before. They talk about that. It was like an opioid almost, right?
It's an intoxicating substance, and you can get it at the gas station apparently, and gas stations have big signs that say you can get this here. The vaping is a huge problem too with kids getting.
I feel like I see kids vaping everywhere.
Absolutely. And
we don't know what the consequences of vaping are going to be. I think that's still another 10, 15, 20 years down the line. We don't really know what problems kids have from that.
And all the health, early onset health problems and all this. And so, there are laws around it, but they're not, being followed. And so something that I'm really curious about is, I heard that there's the possibility of saying to, say there's a gas station and they have a license to sell gas. If you're caught selling any of these other products, to minors, or, if there's restrictions put on the products, if you're caught selling them, you lose your gas license too.
Wow.
And I think that is something that feels very, strict, but at the same time, if there's no real consequence for continuing to sell and the profit margin on these products is large, then they'll take the slap on the wrist once in a while and that's it. So,
right. And I'm glad you brought that up because we talk about all the time that there need to be consequences for actions, right? These people that live these lives of crime, some of the bail reforms we saw over the last couple of years, it led to penalties not fitting the crimes. So I'm glad you brought up having to make sure that the consequence is something that the perpetrator is not going to want to have to deal with, right? This is not worth the cost of doing business.
Correct. And and not something that they can just, whatever it is, pay the fine, whatever, and say, okay.
It needs to be a true deterrent.
I I feel like we've talked about a lot today. Honestly, I have a great appreciation after listening to you talk and seeing you out there. You really like to put your boots on the ground and get really into the nitty gritty of what's going on in your community. I have a great appreciation for that because I think that's an efficient way to run government, and that's the way it should be run. Is there any parting words you want to leave or anything you want to talk about yourself or your office and your staff? And let the public know as we conclude this podcast episode.
Sure. Well, I hugely appreciate being on here and always getting the chance to chat with you guys. And I know it's continuing conversations always. So to you, to anyone, in the PBA, the Suffolk Police, and anyone at large, I'm here to listen. And I think, for whether it's pointing out one of the 9,000 pieces of legislation or pointing out a community problem, I always encourage people, don't assume that I already know about it. And, say, oh, well, if she's not doing something, then she must know about this because I know about this. It's please call us, email us, let us know what's on your mind, and any issues that you're facing. And we're happy to be there because the government was built to serve the people. And so I look at my role as helping make that connection between the people and the government that was built to serve them. So please, help me help you in that sense. Whatever it is, whether you think I'm going to agree, disagree, don't make assumptions, and I know we already have that relationship, and I hugely appreciate that where we can have those conversations. And I look forward to being a part of helping people exercise that ability to say, here's my opinion on this. Here's my perspective. Here's why. And even if we don't walk away feeling the same way about it, I've learned something. And that's hugely valuable to me as a representative of the folks here. So
yeah, those open lines of communication are something we preach all the time, and we appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, absolutely.
We appreciate you joining us today. And
thanks for having myself and so many other great guests on. Different perspectives, different focuses, but all public safety and just helping the messages get out there to people and knowing that you're working for them too. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Great to ask for joining us.
Thank you so much.